We are back with Don Kinsler with the NDSU Extension Service, and we're talking tomatoes today. Don, thank you so much for joining us once again. I do want to talk about disease and how we avoid that, but first, can we back up and talk about maybe soil when we're getting started? What kind of soil, and talk about temperatures and covering up tomatoes as well. Where do we start?
Well, we talked about getting tomatoes as early as possible because that's always fun to get some of the early ripe ones. And I mentioned that tomatoes are very sensitive to warmth, and tomato roots do not start growing until the soil temperature reaches 55 degrees or warmer. Right now, we're just in the high 40s in soil temperature. So a couple of things we can do to get that soil to warm faster, and one of those is using clear plastic. Now, you might think, well, doesn't black plastic warm up quicker? But actually, black plastic, the surface might warm up of that, but it doesn't let the sunlight penetrate through. So actually, to warm the soil, and we don't need to do this with all our tomatoes, but for a couple of plants to get the earliest ripening, we can use clear plastic laid onto the soil. And you can actually do that now, a couple of weeks before you're going to plant your tomatoes. Lay clear plastic down, weight the edges around, and the clear plastic will let the sun penetrate through. It creates kind of a greenhouse effect, and it markedly improves the soil temperature, heats it up well. And then in a week or so, you cut a slit, an X-shaped slit in the plastic, and plant your plant down in. And that will hasten the ripening, the growth and ripening of a plant or two. So we can get a couple of earlier fruiting tomatoes.
Oh, I love that. That's a great tip as well, because people are itching to get outside and do something right now as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one thing you can do to start getting the soil to warm up quicker. Then planting tips too. Do we have a next slide? Planting. Now, planting tomatoes, it's important to plant them deeply because tomatoes have the ability to root all along the stem. If we plant them too shallowly, the wind just kind of whips them back and forth. But remove the lower leaves on the tomato and then plant them all the way down as you see in the photo there. And they'll root along the stem and produce a much huskier, healthier plant. Now, if you've got a tall tomato plant that sometimes it's hard to get it down that far, we can even lay them in a shallow trench as pictured on the right-hand side. You can even lay them down and then cover them with soil so that just the top set of leaves really is sticking out. Then less wind blowing on them, and they'll root and produce a very nice plant.
That's interesting. How about, and I don't know if you have this on a slide, but how about watering? I tend to overwater things. Is that possible with tomatoes?
Watering. Now, with tomatoes and with most garden vegetables, they would like about 1 inch of rain or water per week. So it's important when you do water to water more deeply. That's much better than frequent light sprinklings.
Okay. And what other advice do you have for people?
Let's see. I actually happen to have a tomato plant here. I put plastic around because we don't usually have tomato plants in our living room. But anyway, an example here with this tomato plant, if I hold it the right direction, we could plant that right up to about here. Remove the lower leaves and plant it right up to about here. Also, when you're shopping for tomato plants, look for plants that have a rich green color. Avoid those that are a little bit yellow. They've maybe lacked nutrition. So look for a rich green color and a nice stocky plant.
Oh, okay. That's great advice. Okay, so you gave us so much great information. If people are heading to the store, they want to take a look again at some of those, options. Do you have is this all listed on the NDSU Extension website? I mean, even like the planting, that was way higher than I thought, way deeper than I would have thought you would go.
Yeah, exactly. Some good tips. And so there is my email address for any questions. So do take a look, do a search for the NDSU Extension site. You can search for tomato information. My email address is there. I love getting questions. And if you do have any questions, feel free to send me a photo as well. Oftentimes we can deal with some of the things and give information through the use of a photo or two.
Okay, we still have a little time. Any last? Oh yeah,
yes.
I think I wanted to avoid this.
The slide there shows a common problem with tomatoes, especially the earliest fruiting ones. That's called blossom end rot. It's not actually caused by a fungus or a bacteria. it is caused by what we do in the soil. It's actually the plant can't use up calcium out of the soil, so it sucks the calcium out of the developing fruit and does like that. The next slide shows a way that we can prevent that, and that is by mulching around the tomato plants with straw, dried grass clippings, wood chips. That will keep the moisture more uniform. It's important to avoid that blossom end rot disease by keeping the soil more uniform instead of fluctuating soil moisture. But don't put the mulch on until late June because, as I mentioned, we want the soil to warm up. If you put mulch around tomatoes too soon, it keeps the soil too cool. So wait until the end of June and then apply mulch around the tomatoes. That's one of the best ways to prevent that blossom end rot.
Don, great information today. What to do and what not to do and how to avoid rot. I love it. Hopefully we all have a great tomato harvest this year and that tomato race that we are all in right now.
Yeah, the great tomato race.
The great tomato race. Don, always great to visit with you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks again. Have a great spring. Thank you.
You too. Stay with us. Coming up on North Dakota Today, we are continuing to spotlight local nonprofits in need of your help.